Welcome to the Adapter's Advantage, the podcast that shares insider stories about breakthrough moments that lead to success. Get ready for an inspiring conversation about adapting to change from Allego, the all-in-one sales enablement platform built for success in a hybrid world. Let's dive right in.
Hello, I'm Mark Magnacca. I want to welcome you to the next episode of the Adapter's Advantage podcast. Today, I'm excited to have as my guest, Melissa Finnegan. Before we get started, I want to give you a little background on Melissa. Melissa Finnegan possesses a broad depth of experience that comes from 25 years of service in the financial services industry. She currently serves as the VP Training and Development at Lincoln Financial Distributors. In this capacity, Melissa and her team are responsible for conducting product, sales, and technology training for all employees, which includes training on Lincoln's annuity, long-term care, life, and small market retirement plan businesses. Her team supports individuals and teams in developing the skills and behaviors they need to achieve high performance and growth for the role they're taking, the role they're in, and for the role they want. Melissa has 2 children, Jake and Leela, and her hobbies include traveling, cooking, and she has her black belt in Kempo Karate. We're going to get to that one. Melissa, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So let's go ahead and jump right in, Melissa. When you meet people for the first time and they, say that, so you're at Lincoln Financial, what do you do? I'm curious, what do you say?
Well, it's interesting because you read it out of my bio. Normally my response is the Center for Professional Development is really responsible for anyone that gets hired at Lincoln. We are there to support them from the beginning of their career. So the job that they are taking, we're helping them get better in the current role that they're in. And then ultimately our job is to help them prepare for the role that they ultimately want. And whether they're selling annuities, life insurance, long-term care, or in our small retirement plan space, our job is the same. It's to ultimately help them be the best that they can be in the role that they're in.
You know, what's interesting, just jumping right in here, Melissa, the fact that that you have an organized collection of words to answer the question versus I'm in learning and development, right? That's the first observation. The second one, the fact that Lincoln has thought about this to such an extent that you have a center, and in particular, that idea that you didn't just say we train new hires, right? If you think about a longer term career at a company, being able to train new hires for the job that they were hired for and for the job that they're going to move to over time, that just brings a whole different level of thinking, I have to imagine, to your group.
We spent a lot of time working on our vision and our mission for what the Center for Professional Development is. In the past year, we've gone through a lot of change. We have a lot of new faces on the team, which is very exciting to see and see that Lincoln's investing in that. And we thought it was really important to spend time as a collective team coming up with what is the vision for this team and what is our mission. And ultimately, that is one of the things that stuck out to all of us is that, of course, we're the first face that people see when they come in, but we're in constant contact with them throughout their career at Lincoln, which is really cool to see people start on an inbound sales desk. And then ultimately, we've had folks that started as internal that are VPs and national sales managers now. And we've been there for their entire career progression. And that's just really cool to see.
Well, I love the concept of a center of excellence, if you will, but in this case, the Center for Professional Development, the idea of a place where all of these best practices can be captured, they can be archived, they can be organized, and then they can be reused. And, like anything in life, that's how you do get better. So in a sense, the way that you've organized your group is a learning organization in and of itself.
Yeah, we toyed with the name a little bit because originally we were like, sales development, but not everyone that we work with is in a sales role. And so we thought it made more sense to have it named the professional development, because part of what we do as well is we help train the financial professionals and the agencies that we work with. We're not always working just within our organization. A lot of our content we'll repurpose and say, hey, would this make sense? And do we think this would be beneficial for financial professionals or marketing organizations? And a lot of times the answer is yes. And so we'll deliver content outside of Lincoln as well.
And I've seen that content. I know over during the pandemic, you had a number of different themes that you were able to leverage and really help set Lincoln apart relative to your own thought leadership that your team could be bringing both at the wholesale level and through your LFD advisor side of the house. So let's back up for a moment, though, Melissa. Let's talk about how you got into this industry. I'd like to know a little bit more about your journey and maybe who influenced you that caused you to decide on Lincoln and really spend a good chunk of your career there so far.
I wish I had this, like this is what I always thought I would do. I kind of fell into the financial services. When I graduated high school, my uncle was a vice president for a bank, and he got me a job as a teller at a local, it was Fidelity Bank at the time, which hasn't been around forever. It's Wells Fargo.
Mhm.
And I worked there off and on through college. They were great to me. They let me come back as a temp, and I would work every summer and over Christmas. And when I graduated, there was an opportunity to go to the platform side, the customer service side, to do loans. And right at that time was right around when it became First Union,
Mhm.
and they started to license their platform folks to sell at the time mutual funds and annuities, fixed
Yes.
annuities. And so I took the opportunity at that point to kind of transition into that role. I was working in the foreign currency area at the time, which was really cool to deal with all the different currencies, and I enjoyed that. But then they said, hey, we'll get your licenses. You can work pretty close to home. And I was like, okay, well, that sounds cool. Like it just kind of happened.
Yep.
And then I worked there for a while, and I got a call from a recruiter that said, hey, well, at the time it was Delaware Investments, is looking for sales folks. And I knew that the type of sale that I was doing wasn't a natural fit for me. At the time, I was fairly young. I was working in an area that was a lot of older clientele. I had trouble, I feel like, building trust because
Mhm.
they were like, what are you going to tell me about mutual funds, that I don't already know? So I was a little hesitant to get into another sales role, but when I went and did the interview, I just loved the environment. I love that folks who could promote me would be on the same floor as me. Whereas when you work for like a large institution, the headquarters was in Charlotte. They
Right.
didn't know me from anybody else. And so I just had such a great experience during the interview process. They offered me the role. I took it. I started as an internal wholesaler, one of the first internal wholesalers to sell our annuity product at the time, which was Choice Plus. It was a new product. Did that for some years. Then I became in a sales leader position, which I really enjoyed. And then ultimately in 2008, I applied for and got the annuity product training role. And in the last so many years, that has really morphed into where I am now. It was, I built it out for annuities, and they said, hey, we really liked what you did with annuities. Can you do that with small market retirement plans? And I said, sure. Then they gave me some people to help me. And then it was like, okay, well, we love what you're doing here, but we want to start getting into sales skills. Can you kind of train other people to do the product stuff? And we'll have you do more of the sales approach. And that is where I kind of fell in love with what I do every day. I loved all my jobs, but teaching sales skills that are agnostic, that help everybody get better, and seeing aha moments was what really resonated with me. And that's what I love doing.
I totally get that, Melissa. And it's such an interesting piece because you have this credibility when you've come from the sales side of it yourself,
Right.
right? And not everybody, there's a lot of people in the L&D world who came up in an instructional design background, right? And they have some very unique and important skill sets. And in my experience, in the realm of sales, the model that has existed is, can you do this thing that you're asking me to do, right?
Right.
But what we've seen is that even people who don't have your skill set, and I think it's a word that you've used in our previous conversation, this notion of curating, that even if you don't have, as a listener, the skill or the background that Melissa has, you still can be really good at curating the subject matter experts, whether it's on sales skills or whether it's on product skills, right? Any one of those different types of skills. And
Right.
then you're the point person, like as we say, the orchestra conductor doesn't play any instruments, but they're orchestrating the whole thing. So it's a very interesting dynamic. And I'm just curious, one of the things that I would call out that when you first started as an internal, were there many women in that role at that time?
No, I was the only female on that particular team. We had a few other females. And it's funny because I still remember to this day being in a meeting. It was a divisional sales meeting. And I don't know why I never really noticed it before, but I'm sitting and I'm counting how many people are in there. And there was probably 35 people. And I was the only female at the meeting. And I had never really noticed it before. It
Yeah.
really, I never felt like an outsider, or because I was a woman, I didn't get any opportunities. So I never really like thought about it before. And then I remember looking around and be like, oh my gosh, I'm the only female in here. That has changed a lot.
Yes.
The sales desk now is so diverse. But yeah, when I started, I was the only female on the team for a long time, actually.
Well, the interesting thing about it is that, these sort of collective beliefs that that exist. And I've interviewed a number of women, Melissa, on the podcast from, a range of industries, a number of authors and thought leaders on this very topic. And one of the things that I've seen over and over again is the fact that once someone kind of breaks through, then all of a sudden it becomes much easier to imagine yourself being able to do that role. It's just, I call it the Jackie Robinson principle, right? Someone's got to get out on the field to say, oh, no, I can do this too. Maybe I can do it as well or better than other people on the field. It's just being the first one is hard.
Yeah. And I wasn't I make sure there were other females selling other products on the team. There wasn't a lot of us, but I was the only one specifically on this particular team. But yeah, we were few and far between. And now it's opened up, and I would venture to say we have just as many females as we do males on the team at this point.
That's pretty amazing. It really is. I mean, it says a lot about the culture and really about the shift in mindset. So let me pivot you. So you've kind of fast forward, you find this sweet spot. You've done sales training, you've done product training, you've done technology training. What would you say is different in your experience, knowing that many of the people listening are in sales enablement, they're in training, and sometimes they do each of those things as an individual thing, and in some cases they do all of them. What's your experience about what's different on just kind of sales training versus the product or technology?
I don't find a huge difference. Obviously, technology training is so kinesthetic. People have to do it. But I find that really applies whether it's sales training, product training, or technology training. We kind of take the know, show, do approach. Here's what you need to know. Here's the theory concept behind it. We're going to show you what this looks like in action, either through someone who's been successful already doing it. And then we're going to have you do it, because that's the only way you really learn is if you practice it. And whether that's art of discovery and asking the right types of questions through role play, or it could be knowledge checks through product training, and then ultimately technology, which is you have to sit down and do it yourself. And then usually we'll do some sort of capstone where we can record them actually using the technology, and then we can tell by engagement and level of usage of the tools whether they're getting it or not getting it.
Got it. So know, show, do, and it doesn't really matter because that premise applies regardless of whether it's sales, product, technology, same basic premise. So let me pivot then to, as someone who has rolled out sales enablement technology, obviously not just a Lego, but other things, what have you found that is most important in order to have a successful deployment of any of these sales enablement technologies?
That's an easy one. Leadership buy-in.
Yep.
If they haven't bought into the value behind the tool, and you have to spend a lot of time with them up front, getting them really comfortable with whatever you're rolling out and get them bought into the why and the value it brings to them, because we're ultimately training the trainers. They're the ones that spend all the time and reinforce anything that we roll out as the Center for Professional Development. And if they're not on board and they don't feel confident, they're not going to talk about it. They're not going to reinforce it. They're not going to encourage it because it's likely they don't feel comfortable using it. And it feels very hypocritical to tell somebody else and hold them to a standard if you yourself aren't using it or comfortable using it. So generally you end up just shying away from the conversation and not bringing it up because you don't want anyone to challenge you. Or I'll speak for myself. I would feel like a fraud if I was like, this is what you need to do. And if someone was like, well, show me, I'd be like, oof, I can't
right.
show you how to do it.
That's right. Let me take a look at
figure it
your
out.
Salesforce and see, have you put those have you inputted the information in? It's a great point, and it's something, Melissa, I've heard over and over again as I've talked to sales enablement leaders. And the reality is, when we're asked at Allego, what is the common denominator? There's no question in my mind. We can have the best sales enablement people on the planet. They've got incredible pedigrees. They've got relevant experience. They have great relationships. But if they don't have buy-in, honestly, it's pushing string uphill.
We've literally had programs where we've rolled it out to almost everyone, and then there'll be one group who's not bought in. And I have said, then there's no point in doing this for this group, because we're going to spend a lot of time customizing it, training on it. And if they don't see the value in it or don't think it applies to what they do every day, there's no point in spending all this time, energy, and effort, because it's not going to get reinforced.
Well said. Well said. And it is so interesting about this, the notion of beginning with the end in mind, because what you recognize is you can do a great job on the front end. But if you're not able to have that reinforcement, the odds are, for so many things, especially things, you even take something like CRM, even before getting to sales enablement. What good does it do just to get it into everybody's hands? If it's not being used over time, it just doesn't harness the power of what it can do. And I think we've seen the same thing, that when you get the buy-in and then you see some success. I will say, though, one of the things that you've done as a group at Lincoln is you've done an outstanding job of, I'll call it, fanning the flames of where there are successful people and helping to promote internally, like, here's an example of one of your peers that's doing this. That goes a long way in helping the no-show do, because then you believe, if that person could do it, now I believe, then I'm much more willing to no-show do.
Absolutely. I mean, we try to find advocates. We'll do pilots with everything and have people test it out first. Generally, the folks that are going to be using it every day, and then try to find advocates to talk about, because I could spend all day saying, here's how this benefits you as a wholesaler, but I'm not a wholesaler.
Right.
And I haven't been a wholesaler for quite a long time. Now I try to hire folks from inside for that reason, that are closer to the process, that can come in and say, here's what worked really well, here's what didn't work. But ultimately, I don't do their job every day. And so to get advocates along the way and champions of what you're doing goes so far to get people to buy in, for sure.
Well, speaking of champions, I have to tell you, there was a recent IRI, and for those of you not in financial services, that's the Insured Retirement Institute meeting that happened. And during that meeting, I got several texts, and it was from leaders across financial services. And the text was, do you know anything about the virtual virtuoso thing that Tim Seifert's talking about? And I just responded, yes, I do. Can you tell the group, what is the virtual virtuoso program, and what was the catalyst for creating it?
Yeah, so obviously virtual virtuoso was something we came up with when COVID happened and everyone went virtual. And we would be on calls, and I'm sure you saw this as well. And we were like, wow, we let it go for a while, thinking like people will pick it up, like they know to turn their cameras on and they know to look professional and have a nice background. And I think we made assumptions, to be quite honest. And then we'd be on calls and I'm like, they look like they're in the witness protection program or like in the caves of Afghanistan. Like no one, like it was like, you can't see them. Their background is like an unmade bed. And I'm like, oh my gosh, are they seriously like what? I don't even like, it was crazy because we were like, what? Like, it was like, because I'm not showing up in person, I could literally wear whatever I want, look however I want. I was like, yeah, I don't think we want to do this. And then we did a survey and we asked the wholesalers, in person, how confident do you feel presenting? And then
Right.
virtually, how confident do you feel? And they answered like, I feel 85% prepared and confident when I present in person, but it was only 50% when it came to virtual. And we
Wow.
said, we need to change that. That's unacceptable. We need them to feel just as confident virtually as they do in person. And that was kind of the catalyst for building out the virtual virtuoso program. And we thought, okay, how do we do this? And the whole team just kind of band together and we took a look at, okay, our medium was WebEx. That's the tool that we were using. So how do
Right.
we get everyone to feel just as confident using WebEx? And we broke it down into 4 videos or 4 topics. The first was just around technology.
Okay.
How do you check your upload speed and your download speed? And where's your router located? And do you have an Ethernet cord versus wire? Like all the basics and just some basic knowledge around, having the best setup. And then video 2 was really around, what does your lighting look like? Where's your camera placement? What does your background look like? How are you minimizing distractions? We understand that some people, they had roommates. They didn't have
Right.
a space to be a virtual virtuoso. So it was like, maybe we need some banners so they could cover up. What does the best virtual background look like? So that was kind of video number 2. Video number 3 was all around communicating, which we've always done. We do a session called Communicating for Results, which is really around, kind of the old fusion concept, right? Tell them what you're
Sure.
going to tell them what you told them. So how are you communicating effectively? How are you separating yourself from every other virtual meeting that they're going to?
Yep.
And then the last one was kind of 201. How do you engage, using names, using the poll feature, using the chat feature, breakout rooms, kind of 201 level, to kind of, again, separate you from everybody else that's doing a virtual. And so everyone had to watch the videos it was 1 a week for 4 weeks. And then they had to record a capstone and we had a checklist of, we want to make sure that you know how to turn the beeps off and on so that during a meeting, someone comes in late and it's like, doo doo, doo doo, doo, and you're like,
Right.
oh my God, this is so annoying. How do you hide videos? Because there were some companies that didn't want us to be able to see people so like, how do you turn
Sure.
off the camera for like little things like that just kind of took you to the next level. That was kind of our focus. And then we just wanted to make sure that people knew how to do it. So not only did they have to go through and kind of share their screen and show like, okay, here's where I would go to turn off, here's where I would go to mute the beeps. But then we had them actually deliver a 5-minute presentation using the Communicating for Results star structure. So we knew they knew how to do it. And that's where we used the Lego and they used it as a smart exercise and they had to send that to their divisional sales managers after they recorded it. And then their sales managers were going through and kind of going through the checklist, okay, and signing off on them being virtual virtuosos. And that's
So,
kind of where the program came from.
Melissa, I have to tell you what's interesting that connects the last 2 things you just said. You mentioned, your respect for influencers on Instagram and the like. One of our roundtable events that I know you've been part of, one of your peers from another company talked about how at her company in the medical device space, they're making a conscious effort to help build the personal brand, if you will, of their sales team so that the salesperson themselves is thought of as an influencer and to some extent a thought leader. And so it doesn't mean that that person has to be known as an expert, for example, on all the different product lines, but
Right.
they have their own respect on this is a person who knows the industry, right? They understand the dynamics at hand. They can talk about it, and then they're curating the people that they're pulling in. And what people don't realize about the virtual world is you can get people to be part of a meeting in this arena much easier than you can in an in-person one. And
Right.
that's where it becomes a real benefit for the internal or for the external wholesaler.
Yeah. And what we found is, I'm still shocked when people want training on how to be better virtually. Cause I'm like, really? Like, I thought this was like done to death at this point, but we still get a ton of requests. And part of the value add was now that we've made you virtual virtuosos, you can turn around and help your financial professionals do their job better, because they're not getting necessarily this. What we found was they're not getting the information.
Right.
And so you were able to turn around and say, hey, here's what I learned about setting up and cameras and, engaging content and engaging your audience. And just the opportunities that it opened up for financial professionals to meet with beneficiaries and make relationships with folks that maybe live across the country, I think has been phenomenal. So there's a lot of opportunity that I think we were forced into, being a part of, but it's been great in that respect as well.
So let me just pin one thing down. We talked, you already said to me that senior management support is critical. I get it. Just in the case of virtual virtuoso, this is a made up thing. You created it internally. You presented it to senior managers. As other senior managers are hearing this and trying to understand, what could I actually do to support that? What did your senior executives do with respect, just using this as an example of an idea? How did they support it so that it actually was so well adopted?
Well, they made it mandatory.
Okay, well, that's the first step.
But a lot of times you don't get that support from the top down, where it's like, well, yeah, you can do it, and whoever wants to kind of become a virtual virtuoso, they can. And that, sometimes people don't know what they need until they actually get it. And they're like, oh my God, I didn't even know I needed to do that, but I really did. Yes. So that was, having that support again from John and Tim and the national sales managers to say, this is a great idea. And this is everything, we talk a lot about intent. The intent is always good. The intent is to help people be better at their jobs, to make their lives easier and help them be more successful ultimately. And when we came up with this program, and anything that we do, I don't take it lightly. If they're taking time out of their job, which is sales, which, time is their most precious commodity, whether it's sales, whether it's sales training, product training, technology training, we don't take that lightly. If we're taking you out of the field, it is to help you get better so that you can be more successful in your role. And ultimately, that's what Virtual Virtuoso was all about, so that they could feel confident, regardless of whether it was in person or virtual, that they could use that as a value add to offer to their financial professionals. And to have the support of John and Tim and all the national sales managers was huge, because they just believed in it enough to say, everyone needs to do this because it will make them better. And that's so key.
So I want to pivot completely for a minute here. I mentioned Kempo karate. How'd you get into that? And to what extent, if any, has that helped you maintain this equanimity that you seem to have in an otherwise kind of dynamic environment?
Well, it's certainly a great stress reliever to punch things. So anytime you can punch and kick a bag, it's always good. It started in college, actually. I don't even remember how I ended up with it as an elective, but my senior year, my last semester, I took it and I really enjoyed it. But when I graduated, talk about confidence, I didn't feel confident trying to find a dojo that was local. So I just kind of forgot about it. And then when I had kids, we had some neighbors who were very involved in karate, and the kids were like, we want to try it. So I took them and signed them up, and I would go to, classes when they went, and they had some mommy and me classes. I was like, wow, I missed this. Like, I forgot how much I enjoyed this. Now at this point, I'm like 40 years old. And I'm like totally out of shape. I remember being so sore after the first class, but I was like, you know what? I'm just going to go. It's good exercise. It's something I enjoy doing. And whatever happens, happens. Like, I wasn't really planning on getting my black, but I wasn't not planning on it, but I wasn't like, this is why I'm going. I'm going to get my black belt. I was just like,
I just want to lift my leg to be able to hit the bag, right?
I just want to be able to move without being sore the next day. Would be awesome. But I went to classes, and it was like twice a week was kind of like how many times you needed to go in order to get your next belt. And then the competitive side of me started to kind of kick in. And I was like, well, I want to get my belts on time when I'm supposed to get them. So that kind of motivated me to go twice a week. And then I'd be like, well, just in case I can't go twice a week, let me go like 3 or 4 times a week. And then it became
Ah,
like a family because it's the same people all the time in the classes. So you become really good friends, and we would start doing stuff outside of karate. And it was also a very hard time in my life personally. So it was a great escape where, like, for an hour, especially in sparring class, if I didn't want to get hit in the face, I had to really be
right.
focused and I couldn't think about anything else. So it was kind of like an escape for me as well.
Yes.
And then unfortunately, I separated my shoulder sparring. It put me out for like 5 months. And I was really afraid I wasn't going to get my black belt when I was supposed to get it with the group of people that I was supposed to get it with. But the timing actually all worked out. And it just became, some of the things that, karate teaches you, obviously it's patience, and it's this idea of, and we always say it in class, it's, I can always do better than I think I can.
Yes.
And the whole principle is that you never stop learning karate. You don't get your black belt and you're done. There's a second degree and a third degree and a fourth degree. And the fact that the belt is white under the black, so that the longer you wear it, it wears off, kind of reminds you from where you came from. So there's this whole philosophy of just, you never stop learning. And that is so relevant to what I do every day, which is training and development and learning. And not only for the people that I train, but for myself. Like, I take that so seriously. Like, I can't teach something that I don't know myself. And what else can I be learning to help pass that on to other people? And this idea of a rising tide lifts all ships, right? Like, I want to lift all the ships at Lincoln. Like, everything that we do helps Lincoln as a whole. And that's kind of the philosophy that I've taken from, karate, and kind of brought into this role as well. And to do things that are scary. Like, I was petrified to go to that first class. I was like, people are going to laugh at me. I'm 40 years old. I'm super out of shape. And they just embraced me. And it was just, one of the greatest experiences of my life. So I'm very grateful to that sport, for sure.
Listen, there's a number of really profound connections in what you just said. First, the notion of competition and what a great energizer it is for so many of us, right? Like, all of a sudden you have competition on something, and it takes on a whole different light, right? And then this idea, the fundamental premise that I can always do better than where I am now. And you think about applying that in the context of sales at Lincoln, right? Both on on your team as an L&D team, as
Yeah.
well as for sales, the sales people, kind of recognizing that, no, you're not done. Just because you've been doing this for 25 years one way, this pandemic has just reminded all of us the belt is white on the other side,
Yeah.
right? And that is, we're back to being apprentices, because you were really good and you had mastered that other arena, but now you got to master this one. And quite frankly, the doing of that, as you just described, this idea that I don't want to be done, right? You might want to keep progressing along and collecting the different awards to signify your success.
Right.
But the journey really is the thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's been an amazing journey. And I love what I do every day. And I think a part of that is because it is new every day. And I have opportunities that John and Tim have allowed me, because a lot of times I feel like, as leaders, you're so focused on helping other people progress that you forget your own education and development.
Right.
And that is something that I feel like my boss, Tim Seifert, has really ingrained in me, is that you have to continue to develop yourself as well. And he's so great about making sure, like, he's like, yeah, try it, give it a shot. If you think it'll be, help you be better at your job. Like, most people, like, you're not taking an on-camera class like that. He's like, no, that sounds awesome. Like, do it. Let's see what we can find out
So
from it. Like,
great. No,
yeah,
it's
yeah,
so, and you think about what it does, and it engenders for you this willingness to take risks, right? You don't know how it was going to work out,
right.
but actually, when you think back on it now, we're all going to have to learn how to do this. And by the way, I've taken an acting class. And it was interesting because I learned so much about talking to a camera, and I had
Yeah,
no idea that it would serve the purpose of what we're doing right now. So I think what's really interesting is the culture that you have. There's a reason why Lincoln has this innovative culture. And it's because of people like John Kennedy and people like Tim Seifert that
yeah,
are basically creating an environment for people to ask better questions and try things. And you very quickly find out what's working and what's not working.
right.
But just plodding along, doing the same thing all the time, we know that's not the way to roll.
And it's boring. Nobody
It's
wants
boring.
to.
So true. Well, Melissa, this has been a great conversation. I'm really delighted to get a chance to connect with you in this way. If people want to learn more about you, or they want to learn more about Virtual Virtuoso or about Lincoln Financial Distributors, what's the best way for them to do that?
LinkedIn is probably the best way, although as you and I discovered, I feel like I need to update some of my information on LinkedIn, but they can always chat, and I'll, if they want to know anything else about me, and I'm happy to answer it and make new connections for sure.
That sounds great. Well, listen, a real pleasure to talk with you, and we look forward to continuing the conversation.
Great. Thank you so much for having me. It's been a blast. Thanks, Mark.
You've been listening to The Adapter's Advantage, a podcast from Allego. Stay connected by subscribing to the show at allego.com/podcast, leaving us a rating and comment, and sharing episodes you love. That helps us bring you more conversations about breakthrough moments that lead to success. Thanks for listening. Until next time, remember that one new idea can change your life.